Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Agosto AODocs Quality Management webinar. My name is Jeff Bolistad, Director of Client Success Services for Agosto. As many of you know, one of the ways we help our clients be successful with their G Suite deployments is by evaluating and recommending best-in-class solutions that integrate directly with G Suite. Today, we're joined by AODocs, who has a very powerful cloud document management platform. But before we get started, I'd like to point out that we do have a moderator with us today. As you'll see, there is an area where we can field or take your questions. Those questions will be queued up today with the intent of answering those at the end of the presentation. So please keep them coming, and we'll look forward to collecting those and answering them at the end. A quick agenda. Most of you that have joined today are familiar with Agosto, but we will pause briefly to share a little bit of background and context about why we're here today. My friend Tony Majewski, who I'll introduce in a moment, will then take over. We'll review challenges that many quality managers experience. Tony will talk about agile quality management, and perhaps most importantly, we will then launch an immersive demo so you can get the opportunity to see how AODocs works. As I mentioned, I know many of you joining today, but as a quick reminder, as your G Suite partner, Agosto is a broad Google Cloud partner. We have a deep expertise in G Suite, Google Cloud Platform, Chrome, and many other Google tools. We've been doing this since about 2007, and as I mentioned earlier, we are very selective in the third-party tools that we deploy and recommend to our clients. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend Tony from AODocs. He'll get started, and again, please bring the questions so we can help answer at the end. Tony, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff. Absolute pleasure to be co-hosting this webinar with you guys. I'm Tony Majewski, sales engineer, ECM specialist with AODocs. We are going to cover kind of a brief overview of what AODocs is, and then a targeted overview of the quality management use case. Obviously, quality is pretty wide-ranging. When you think document management, content management, and you think quality, you think more document control than anything else. And that's going to be the use case that we cover today. But it is a very universal platform. It is very dynamic. It is something that can be extended well beyond the document control use case. It can be extended across the quality landscape to cover different areas like CAPA, audits, findings, incident reporting, product lifecycle management, things of those nature. So well beyond SOPs and policy and procedure publication, which is what we're going to talk about today. And the main value that we try to bring to the G Suite is really eliminating the friction and the compromise that typically exists with what is considered the legacy content management platforms. So when you hear SharePoint, when you hear Lotus, when you think custom applications, or you think solutions like OpenText, you think powerful content management and a lot of capabilities, but the adoption usually isn't there because the users have to be trained how to speak that language, that content management language, rather than the language they speak as a business user. And that's really what we try to focus on. Obviously, you get the power of the G Suite cloud infrastructure. People get that anywhere access, but we need to have IT control. There needs to be very targeted processes, specifically when we are talking policies and procedures and quality management. If you're looking for that ISO 9001:2015 certification, which we have customers maintaining with AODocs. So we really bring that all together, and we do eliminate those friction points and that compromise because, yes, it's built with organizational process and foundational requirements, but it makes sense for the business user. And that's something that I'll focus on today's demonstration of the platform. But that is really what we're doing, and we are focusing on quality today, but we are seeing an enterprise deployment of AODocs. You're seeing a one-to-one with the G Suite. Enterprise content management should be just that, appropriate for the enterprise. There are foundational requirements that exist for the content types that are being managed across all of your different organizational units, and then subunits and sub-processes within areas like HR, operations, communications, things like digital asset management, contract, NDA management, RFP publication, submittal capture, hiring, maintaining HR documents out of an HR system, doing incident reporting, things like that. So, you do have that wide ranging of capabilities with our platform. You do have the ability to incorporate enterprise grade retention and disposition on all of these content types across the organization. So again, very flexible in how we bring that value to organizations. But again, today's focus, quality management, quality control, QA, quality improvement. We want organizations to work quickly and within a well-defined process. And for that to happen, you need to have very standardized processes. You can't have areas where the user can work outside the defined process. We need it to make sense for all parties involved. If you have knowledge that's being created or maintained within this system, this document control system, your users that need to consume that content and that knowledge need to be able to quickly access it. And they need to be able to do so in as few clicks or search terms as possible. So by giving you those tools and giving the users access to those tools and not only just creating and maintaining, but consuming, we are able to create an agile quality management environment. You're easily able to go in and make adjustments to your technical documentation that you're using and consuming. But from an AODocs perspective, you're able to easily go into the system and make adjustments to the actual content management platform and the workflow mechanism without really relying on IT. A good portion of our customers actually push the ownership of these AODocs environments down to the business users rather it being an IT task. And by doing that, you obviously remove IT overhead by not involving IT as much, but by enabling and empowering those users to manage their process better with a workflow engine and a content management platform that makes sense. So by having a solution that makes sense for users, that focuses on adoption, we're going to improve compliance. We know that the processes are in place. They cannot work outside of those processes. You're able to evolve as your organization and your processes evolve. You're going to improve quality. You're going to improve all of these processes. So again, tools that make sense for everyone that's involved, everyone wins. That's what the big focus is here with our platform. Security oftentimes comes up. So number one, is my content secure? What are we doing to make sure that my users are accessing the right content, that they're not able to pull the content out? So data loss prevention, file loss prevention. How do I know that they're not able to organically share that content outside the organization? These are obviously controls that we're going to have out of the box with our platform and our integration with G Suite and the SSO with your G Suite users, groups, and dynamic roles. But since we're built 100% within the Google infrastructure, it means that we fall directly in line with all of those security and compliance regulations and certifications that Google is maintaining internally, which is great. And then if you're looking at things like HIPAA, we're more than happy to sign a BAA with your organization to, and then ensure that AODocs with Drive is something that where you can store content that's personal or financial related. AODocs as an organization is SOC 2 certified, so we maintain SOC 2 certification. We actually use AODocs internally to go through training and certifications so our employees are following the proper steps so we can maintain that SOC 2 certification, which we recently just had our re-up with them. We also have a security officer on staff who's more than happy to have any granular conversations with you guys about security. We also have additional encryption available through our Virtru partnership, another ISV within the G Suite family. And then we also have some really great new features coming out. So we have a new feature called Document Transmittal that allows you to send content out of AODocs as an attachment via email to a third party. So if you need to send content out to a vendor or to an auditor, you can do that. You can watermark it, but we can also password protect those PDF attachments in email as well. So it's a newer feature that was just pushed out a couple of weeks ago. It's really exciting. And again, adding more and more features and functions to our platform. Our customers, we've been around for over 6 years now, 800 plus clients, over 2.3 million active users. A lot of Google's large enterprise organizations are leveraging AODocs because they have environments like SharePoint, like Lotus, like OpenText that they need to bring to the cloud. And they also want it to make sense for their users. It has to fit that Google methodology, and AODocs is obviously going to bring that to the table and being a recommended ISV. But a lot of these brands here are also using AODocs for quality. Some of these organizations that are listed here have actually decommissioned their legacy QMS platforms and replaced it with AODocs. That's usually something that you're not going to hear when you think document management, when you think content management. You think a sliver of the quality conversation. You don't think full-blown quality management, and that really speaks to the dynamic nature of our product. And again, we're more than happy to have conversations about the expanded quality use case, but today is going to be more focused on document control. So that being said, let's talk about this process. SOP publication. So I've got a fake company, Atlantic Labs. This is our demo environment. My fake company relates back to two regulation entities, ISO and the FDA. My fake company has 20 facilities around the globe that I need to monitor. So we need to monitor the quality process and documentation for our global footprint of facilities. But we also understand that different policies may be in place for multiple reasons at these regional and site levels. We have 2 biannual audits per facility that we need to monitor and maintain. So within this environment, we do have a audit finding CAPA environment built out that we're more than happy to show you as a follow-up to this. But in this case, we want to standardize that policy and procedure publication. So we're creating, we're reviewing, we're updating, we're approving new versions, and then we're making sure that this content is instantly available to everyone. And when the users are consuming this knowledge, we know that it's the right version, taking advantage of that G Suite infrastructure, that anywhere access, and that Google SSO. So now the fun part, live demo. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over now to our policy and procedure environment. So I'm user Sam Owen. He's my power user within this environment. Sam has access to a multitude of tools and library types within our environment. He also has access to our Google site. So we've built up a Google site for this demo environment as a way for our users to consume knowledge. So Google site had a recent update that allowed for targeted sub-site security, which is a really great enhancement to the Google Sites environment. And it allows us to push our content out. It allows us to create a mechanism for users to consume knowledge. And by showing you guys this, I'm kind of starting at the end here. How are users consuming knowledge? How are users kicking off process? So if you've got areas where someone wants to request a new policy document or a new technical document or a new SOP, you might give them a Google form plugged into your site or your intranet. That can hook directly to an AODocs workflow. So really understanding who your users are, what their level of access needs to be, what their contribution points are within the workflow. Are they submitting a form? Do they need visibility of that form throughout its workflow? Or are they someone that's consuming knowledge? So in this case, we've got our policy and procedure portal view. So I can come in and I've got a full roster of all my documents. I can come in and say, okay, we talked about finding content in as few clicks as possible. I need to find everything related to my ISO 9001 certification. I can do that in one click. I've established my requirement as a metadata value, which allows me to come in and find all of my documents related to that specific requirement. Or a text search. You can find everything related to good laboratory practice. I can quickly drill in and find documents related to that requirement. So as few clicks, as few search queries as possible, language that makes sense for the user, making sure that content that is not approved doesn't show up in this environment, making sure that if this HR policy or another instrument policy is going through a revision that's non-critical, that the current version is still available. So those types of things, those levels of access. It might be something to where, I need to see location-based content. So why not show it in a location-based map? So leveraging AODocs information, in our case, GeoPoint is a standardized metadata value. I want to see all of the quality documents related to this specific plant. I could do something like that. Again, we want to focus on dynamically available content that makes sense for the users. So let's make the content translate well to the user, both figuratively and literally in some cases when you talk about language as well as business language. So let's go back to the actual power user process of drafting and maintaining policies. So there's really 3 components at play here. You've got your standard, your expected features and functions of the content management. You've got your foundational requirements. You've got your metadata. You've got your categories. If you're a SharePoint user, you understand the term store. You've got your security. You've got your customized views and lists. So those things are going to come standard. The level above that is business process management. So being able to standardize how these policies are are proposed, how they're published, how they're made available, how they go through the revisions. The third layer, which is again very unique to AODocs, is the business intelligence layer and really tying all of these things together. So one example in our landing page for our policies and procedures environment right now is this dynamic view that's giving us insight to our policies and procedures. So novel concept, we want to be able to have real-time reporting on what's taking place in this environment. And so this is an example of AODocs being hooked into a BigQuery table, which is then pushed into Google Data Studio, and it's giving us dynamic insights into our policies and procedures. So this red view here, this is important. So we created a dashboard that's showing us the viewers since last publication. I know that all of my employees need to review this employee confidentiality policy. So this number needs to be greater than 1. So maybe we automatically send out a link based on some business logic we've put in place that anything greater than or less than 5 triggers a resend of this specific policy document, or all these policy documents for that matter. So incorporating the business intelligence to integrate with the business process and the information that we're managing in AODocs at the foundational level. So these landing pages are completely customizable. In this case, we've also got an overview of what this document change control system is looking like from a workflow perspective. So we have our procedure draft, we have our approval process, we then have our published version available to the users. Either ad hoc revision that our external or our general users, our consumers, can trigger if they catch something that's wrong or out of date, and then periodic revisions. So you can automate that as well. That's going to issue a change request because the owner can't just go in and make changes. We need business logic. It needs to be captured in our audit trail, which is going to happen. So if that change request gets approved, we then go ahead and publish that new version, go through that approval, and make sure it's made available to everyone. We have our recent activity. So what this is, it's a glimpse into our audit log. So we have an enterprise-grade audit log. If we want to call ourselves an enterprise content management system, we have to have that. This is a glimpse into it for my user. So I'm logged in as Sam still. So I see recent activity that's relevant and accessible by Sam. There might be 700 SOPs in this environment. Sam, as a user, his inclusion in a Google group or a dynamic role may mean that he only has access to a subset of that 700, let's say 200. So that means that he doesn't automatically have visibility to the 500 that he doesn't have access to. So again, it's a targeted view of the recent activity. If we move to the bottom left here, workflow. So in this case, we have one workflow in this environment. It's our SOP publication. Same concept, slightly different. Sam, again, we're logged in as Sam. We're integrated with that SSO. So we might have 700 SOPs in this library, but only 72 are relevant to Sam in a workflow perspective. It means that he's attached to them in some shape or form as a draft, as someone who's drafting a new policy, as someone that owns a policy, or someone that's going through a current update, or as a policy owner. So that way you can have quick access to your actionable items within the workflow. You've essentially got a queue that's available to you. You then have your customized list. So we move up to the document list, the document views. You're able to create as many of these as you want. You're able to target them to whoever needs to be able to see them. In this case, I've got one that has all of my policy documents. So if I click this view, it has all of my policy documents that my user has access to. There's no rules or targeted criteria that we've established. So I'm filtering it by 20. I can come in now and go, okay, well, I want to see everything that was created after February 1st. So we can now filter down and see everything that was created after February 1st. All right, I want to see everything that was for corporate after February 1st. I want to see everything with a monthly periodic revision that was created since February 1st. So I can drill down and quickly find content. This is leveraging that metadata that we've given in the filters. I could alternatively come in and say, you know, I'm looking for a specific SOP number, or I'm looking for something that's contained in one of these physical attachments. So you can actually do a string search across the metadata, but you can also push that string search down into the physical text searchable attachments. In this case, we're also sorting by the workflow state. So if I want to see everything that's published that meets this criteria, I can easily do that. You also have the ability to create these targeted views. So we just looked at a macro level view, everything that this specific user, Sam, has access to. What if I wanted to see one that was just my corporate policies that were in the published state? So that's exactly what this view is. This view is going to remove the clicks from the user. They don't have to go in and go through that process. This view is only showing corporate policies that are in the published state. And this is essentially a mechanism to push this content and this information out to a site, out to an intranet, to where the content can be made available because it's dynamically going to be included in this specific site. So we've talked about access, we've talked about consuming. Now let's talk about the actual process. So again, what's our focus here? We want it to make sense for everyone involved. We want it to be a defined process. We don't want to create opportunities for the user to live outside the process. So we have a new button here. I've got the ability to create a new policy document. This is our general functional document class. I also have the ability to create a new instrument operation document. I also have the ability to create a new safety and protection document. These are all three the same document class, but we understand that our users, if we are going to eliminate steps, it's going to make sense if we have metadata pre-populated, if we have templates pre-attached, so the user doesn't have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 extra steps to make sure they're following our process. They shouldn't need an SOP to be able to use the content management system. But in this case, we're going to go without the template. I'm just going to create a new policy document. So we're going to start in this area. A few things. What's the first thing that our user is now focused on when they click that new button? They're focused on capturing properties, the metadata, the important information, the mission critical information when it comes to an audit, when it comes to the users finding this information. We don't want the user to draft or create the document and then hope they fill in that information after the fact. In this case, you'll notice a red asterisk. That means if I don't click this field, I can't click save. I can't work outside that process. I have to figure out what these fields are. So in this case, let's go with a new HR policy. What's the scope and the purpose? In this case, we've got the ability to include added descriptions to the fields. So describe the procedure in a few words. So we'll say that this is an HR onboarding policy for our Atlanta office, which is rapidly growing. Who's the department of users that needs to have access to this? So by choosing this dropdown of corporate, this could dictate who needs to automatically receive the notification when this document is done, approved, and available. What's the classification? Internal, being able to dynamically determine what level of security that needs to be put in place on this document. Are there any extra specific impacted users for this policy? In this case, it's just a single person field. This could be dynamic to where I attach multiple users, but you'll notice that this plugs into the G Suite to where I can go in and say, okay, Tony is a part of this process. Let's add them. They're an impacted user beyond the traditional scope. What's the social requirement? You'll keep in mind that when we were in the portal view, these categories were available to the users. Periodic revision. We talked about this. Quarterly. Let's set that as a quarterly revision. That means that our document owner or owners are going to automatically get an email on a quarterly basis to say, hey, review this HR onboarding document for the Atlanta office. And at that point, we're able to determine what actions they have available to them. Do they need to archive it? Do they need to create a new version? Do they need to maintain the current version? Do we want to impart an expiration date on this specific policy? Let's go ahead and say that we're going to do quarterly revisions up until the end of the year. And then at that point, we're going to decommission this document. This also has a template document pre-attached. When I referenced templates earlier, that was more pre-filled metadata because we knew what types of documents they were. But as a baseline, we at least want them starting with some level of Google document. When I click save, I was able to click save, number one, because I had all my mandatory fields filled. But again, we want to focus on user efficiency. I am automatically generating the file naming convention. I'm automatically generating an SOP number. Again, things that we shouldn't have to rely on the user to go back and look at. What was the last SOP created? Okay, what was it? +1. All right, let's really hope that I was using a unique SOP number at that specific state when I created this document. No, let the system automate that. Let the system do the heavy lifting in those areas. So I've got my metadata captured. I've now got my Google document available to me. So highly collaborative, right? Google Documents. But in this case, we want it to be targeted collaboration and targeted access because this document is in a draft state. So what does that mean? It means in AODocs, we can look at the person that created the document, in this case, Sam, and we can say, all right, that user and that user alone is going to be the only person to have visibility to this document. Or this user plus the approvers, or this user plus the corporate document approvers. So the rest of the organization could have full visibility to the approved documents, but meanwhile, we have this document currently in the draft state where Sam can come in and go, okay, new onboarding, SOP for Atlanta. What do we want to say? Key card, XYZ. You get the picture. You get to come in, you get to start from somewhere. Header footer is predefined. Boilerplate content is already included in the document. And we can have a certain level of collaboration based on the defined security that we've put in place here. The same concept of defined collaboration and targeted collaboration is going to extend to the workflow. So in the top right, I've got this workflow action. We're using that same concept. The only person that can send this document for approval is the person that created the document, which means you've got dynamic workflow access on a per document level, dynamically established with one single workflow and one single role of selecting document creator here. So I can say send for approval. Each of your actions can have a comment. So in this case, I've got the ability to have a comment. It's optional in this specific example, but we'll be polite and we'll say, please review. You can have actions that have comment enforcement. You're still able to maintain commenting on your file types. So you can still have your comments within the Google Doc itself. You can still maintain redlining within a Word document. You'll still have it at the file level, but now when I bring it to the next step, so we're in under approval, you're going to notice that a few things changed. Number one, I no longer have a workflow action. Sam can't approve his own SOP. I don't have a pencil here, the edit button, that's going to allow me to edit the metadata, because in this state, our business logic now dictates that we have to create a new version to edit any of this information or the document itself if there needs to be more revisions. And on the right, I've got my transition history. So my workflow transition history, the documents transition history, and I also have my comments. So I can see that. I can see my comments on the document itself. I still have access to my document, but you'll notice that the permissions have been redefined. We've gone from full edit to now view and suggest. So I can collaborate with my approver. We need to make changes to this document still, but we're versioning those changes now at this point. In this case, it's still collaborative. We're still taking full advantage of the G Suite, but it's defined. So who's my approver? So we're going to slide over now. We're going to go ahead and find that approver. In this case, it is Tony. We mentioned him earlier when we were doing that person field tag. Tony could be in a different country. Tony could be at a different site. Tony could be on a Delta flight using the GoGo Wi-Fi. He's going to get a targeted email. It's going to say, hey, you've got a new policy. You've got a new SOP that you need to review. These are completely customizable. Since he's accessing this through email, in this case, it's through Gmail, what does that mean? It means that he can get this from any device as long as he's logged into that G Suite account. So I could be on my iPhone, I could be on my Samsung device, I could be on a tablet. I'm logged in. It's giving me access. I see the metadata. This is what we've wanted to include. I could go back to the document in AODocs. We have this term here, attachments, the document's attached, the policy template. It's very important to note that even though we're using the term attachment here, we're not creating a parallel copy and then attaching it to the email. And this was mentioned to me yesterday by someone in a conversation, an exchange / content management joke. What is the most widely used document management system? It's Microsoft Exchange, ha, ha, ha. But, that's not what we're doing here. We're linking back into AODocs. We have that single source of truth that we're referencing, in this case, the actual document. So Tony can access it. He can view it. He can collaborate with Sam in real time on this document. We can make the necessary changes before it's published. And we know it's the right version because it's the version maintained in AODocs. We see that right here, up here, using our breadcrumbs feature. Tony, also has the ability to open up that metadata in this view. And he has the ability to approve or reject it from the Google Doc view. If he rejected it, we talked about actions that require comments. A comment is required for this transition. So, XYZ should be ABC. So now I can go ahead and submit this change. It goes back to Sam. We automatically create a new version. We're going about our job the way that we should because the process is defined and it's automated. In this case, let's go back and say everything looks good and we'll approve it from the document. That means that my user here, he can approve it from his Gmail instance on his computer, but it means he can also approve it from his phone. If you're thinking about environments where your directors, your C-suite, your managers, your VPs, et cetera, are approving and reviewing documents, how are they usually working? How are they communicating? Are you a phone-first organization that's accessing content remotely? Are you a phone-first organization that needs to approve things? Are you doing that today via Hangouts? Are you doing it today via email? Well, now you can do it through a defined workflow through your phone, just like you would any other way. So I'll just say looks good because we are polite and we are communicating with each other. So I now submit this. We now have a published document. Everything is available. We can send out our global notifications or our defined notifications out to the people that need to access that specific document. So if I reload this document for Sam, we'll see those transitions took place. We'll have full transition history. We've got everything in the audit log that we need to capture to recognize when this document was approved, what was changed, what wasn't changed. You'll see the one in the published state now. If I open this up, we'll see that the transition was made, and I've got my new comments here. Sam, Tony working together, solving problems, fantastic. And if we go back into our view and we go in, we'll be able to see this document. We'll be able to see that it was published. We can see all of the information that was captured throughout the process. In this case, that new HR policy that was created, it's readily available. So that covers a very simple document control use case. It covers, I would say, a portion of the features and the functions that are available from AODocs from a content management perspective. Again, we covered multiple areas here. We talked about the foundational requirement, what you're used to, the metadata, the documents. You know, AODocs being in Drive is fully agnostic in terms of what file types you can have inside of it. AODocs allows you to have multiple attachments in a single container. Everything's stored in Drive. Everything belongs to your organization rather than the creator. So in this case, here's a Word doc and a Google Doc living together side by side. So you have that ability. You have the business process management flexibility. In this case, we showed a very simple document control publication workflow. You got the ability to generate new versions and make new version requests from multiple areas, whether it's this interface or the Google site interface. And then you've got the business intelligence. Okay, I want to see how we're doing from a corporate policy perspective. What are our metrics? How long is it taking us to enforce these policies and create these policies and draft these policies? Who's my power user? Who's responsible for the most documents in my environment? Who's publishing documents the quickest? Who has a high rate of success? This is information that I want to have visibility on. So we're going to be able to give you that visibility. And then again, dynamic access to the content, being able to see this information in a way that makes sense, whether you're a consumer of the knowledge, whether you're a contributor of the workflow, an approver, et cetera, or the power user that's drafting and maintaining these documents. That's where we want to give you guys that flexibility. That's where we want to give you guys that organizational control. And again, being very dynamic to where you can have the quality, the audit, the work order, the incident reporting, the document control, and then spreading that same functionality well beyond the quality use case to the entire organization. Since we are a user-based model, it makes a lot of sense that you're just licensing per user with an infinite amount of use cases that you can deploy across your enterprise. So all that being said, it wraps up the live demo, and now we'll pivot back. If Mac will let me slide back over to our view here. And so we'll open it up for Q&A. At this point, we're going to go ahead and hand the mic back to Jeff and let him moderate, and then we'll be able to answer questions as they come in.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. Again, as a reminder to the group, and I know sometimes folks get shy, so I'm going to perhaps plant a couple of questions, but we would love for this to be a conversation to keep it dynamic. But Tony, from a step one or step zero in the process of getting started, how long does it typically take an organization to move from the platform they're using today onto AODocs? And at a high level, can you describe how that process works or looks without getting into too much detail?
Yep, absolutely. So, a big part of our value is helping organizations modernize their content lifecycle management. So regardless of how you're managing your content today, some organizations have said, we've got a file server, we've got 10 terabytes worth of content. It's unstructured information. We want to structure it. So a good portion of it is that front-end assessment, because we don't just want to take what you have today and move it over. It may be successful. It may be successful in a certain sense, but there's always opportunities to improve the experience and improve how the process is managed. So we can work with you to assess your existing environment, what that migration path looks like to bring that content in. But we also want conversations with you about your day forward process. How are the users working with the process today? Is it heavily email driven? How are they accessing the content as a consumer of the content, the consumer of the knowledge? What do we want that to look and feel like within the G Suite environment? What do the workflows need to look like? So it is really kind of a two-stream methodology. We want to understand what we need to move over, but we want to understand what it's going to look like for you guys, as you move into AODocs, and what it's going to look like as you evolve as an organization. So that's the typical process that's involved. How long it takes is usually dependent on if you want to focus on day forward and go from there and then backfill at a later date with your migration. If that happens, we can have environment stuff as short as a week, a couple weeks, a month. Depends on how big of an environment you want to move over. We have a standard out-of-the-box policy and procedure template that's available in the AODocs interface. So if you wanted an example of what we showed today, it is literally the amount of clicks to get started with an AODocs trial, which I think is somewhere around 4 or 5, and then 2 more clicks to jump into the AODocs interface and create the policy and procedure template. So it's a functional document class. It's a functional workflow. It's got views. It's also pre-populated with sample content and information, so you can see what you're looking at, and then it links directly to our knowledge base. So it gives you video tutorials on everything that you're seeing that's been pre-built in that template, and you can go in and make changes. Again, our full team is available to help you work through those steps and those processes and build things out that are a little bit more advanced as well.
Oh, that's great. And that is exactly the way you described it is how we got started last year when we started working with AODocs. So Tony, thank you. That's really helpful. I do have a couple more questions. We'll fire those at you. What does integration look like with other systems, namely CRM? How do folks evaluate and look at integrations beyond G Suite or things that are integrated with G Suite today, I guess?
Yep, absolutely. And this is a really important point because successful content management is centered around those two concepts of when is the content being created, and so what is that capture point, and then when do users need to consume that information and work with that information. So in the case of CRM or other third-party business systems, there's a wide range of what other organizations are using. So as a platform, we have an open and available API. So anything you can do from a click perspective within AODocs as a user or an admin, simply speaking, you saw us create a document that was click-based. So our API can trigger that. So you can have something like Salesforce say, okay, well, we want to create this sales order got created out of Salesforce. We want to capture it into AODocs with the information that was managed in Salesforce. So that's an example of what that would look like. We also know that not every organization is cloud first. Some organizations are using older ERPs and CRMs. For instance, at my last company, I used this system called TigerPaw. By no means was that a cloud-friendly solution or a even mobile-friendly solution. So, how do we create that hybrid capture point between premise systems and cloud productivity? So we've got areas to create those mechanisms. If we're monitoring a local directory location with an export of data plus the physical attachments, we can automatically check it in that route, that avenue. But there's always conversations. There's middleware options. There's direct API integration, depending on how friendly the two solutions are at shaking hands and passing data back and forth. And then you've got solutions that, if you're familiar with ERPs, typically the legacy systems, they are very hands-off when it comes to their data and the content generated out of them. So typically things like staging tables and middleware are incorporated, but the main point that we want to get across is those avenues do exist because that's a part of our value. So the assessment, the conversation, that's typically what's involved.
Oh, thank you, Tony. I have another that's really good. In fact, I'll admit I get this question from organizations that we work with a lot. And how does AODocs work or support collaboration with external folks who are not on G Suite? Is that a capability today? I think many organizations we work with have some struggles with other organizations accessing things they share.
Yep, this is a great question. I think it comes up almost every day. So number one, it depends on what level of collaboration the organization is looking for. In some cases, collaboration to an organization is, I need to produce a document through a records request or through, a complaint, and I need to send the person that document. And to them, they just want to be able to convert that single document or compile multiple documents into a single PDF, watermark it with the requester, the date, the time, and then send it to them via email. That's one avenue. That's document transmittal. We can do that today. Alternatively, we want to be able to collaborate with them. We want them to have read access or write access to an environment that's G Suite based, in this case, Drive. So we have a brand new solution called AODocs that allows you to actually create collaboration environments in Drive. So in this case, it's in AODocs, in AODocs, and it allows you to share out to external parties regardless of the domain that they reside on. So they do not have to be on G Suite. They have the option of authenticating through something like LinkedIn or O365 or Hotmail, or they can create a standalone AODocs username and password and then have that targeted access, secure back and forth collaboration, depending on the level of access that you give them to that content. So this really opens up a lot of options for organizations that have really been looking for that mechanism outside of anyone that has the link can access, or this link is publicly available. Because I would say in 100% of organizations, facilitating external collaboration through that native mechanism in Drive falls way outside best practices in terms of data loss and file loss prevention. So we're going to be able to give you that avenue through AODocs. And we also do have whitelisting capabilities for other G Suite and Gmail for targeted access and collaboration. So we do offer, a few different options here to organizations that are looking for that level of external back and forth, whether it's collection, sharing, transmittal, et cetera.
Oh, that's so good, Tony. We work with a lot of engineering and marketing firms who traditionally maybe use an old FTP server or something like that to share outside the domain. So that's a really, really good question and answer. All right, next question. Oh my gosh, the print is a little bit tiny on my view here. What is he calling this collaboration with external organizations? Was that AODocs with an X or AODocs with a T, Tony? A little clarification.
BOX as in xylophone, which is a terrible phonetic example of the X, but yeah, BOX.
X-ray. Oh, very good. Thank you. Terrific. I appreciate the clarification. Tony, you touched briefly on Virtru and Encryption, and I don't know, although that is a partner of Agosto's, I don't know that everyone's familiar with that. Can you briefly touch on what does that potential Virtru integration look like, or is that you described earlier?
Yep. So people that are familiar with Virtru, they typically know about it for the email use case that Virtru brings to the table. From a file perspective, it gives you the ability to add that file level encryption to the content when you're bringing it into AODocs. So you have that file level encryption beyond what Google's doing in a Drive perspective for the wide ranging encryption of the content, and then AODocs with encryption from the data back and forth. So it's an added layer of file level encryption using Virtru. So when the document is brought in and when the document's brought out, you have that added file level encryption brought in. And if you have any interest in that, we're more than happy to set something up to where we're involved, it's Agosto, Virtru, and AODocs to go through any specific use cases. So it is something that's very valuable. We do have customers that are using it today for legal, HR, and more financial sensitive information that they want added security on within the system.
Excellent. Yeah, for brief context for those on the call that aren't familiar, that was a really good description. For a lot of organizations that have used ZixCorp in the past, Virtru is a CGIS compliant encryption tool that is a lot more powerful. So that's a really good functionality that you guys added. That's great. All right, a couple more questions. Oh, this is great. Does AODocs have a strategy for supporting Google Cloud Search, which many of us have had glimpses of or some familiarity with that are on G Suite?
That I am not entirely sure from an R&D perspective. We obviously have our own internal search capabilities. leveraging Drive search capabilities. Pretty much anything Google related, our R&D team is usually playing with to see how it integrates with our platform and how it makes it a stronger platform. So I assume that someone may be working on it. I may not be personally aware of it, but we can probably follow up directly with anyone that may be asking that question. For example, one that's come up recently is the Google Vision API. AODocs has actually built out examples to where we're doing OCR, auto tag of PDF documents, other text searchable documents through Gmail capture. So the user never has to key in the data because it's a templatized document. We're using the Google Vision API to automatically tag and record that content. And there's a multitude of use cases for that, invoice capture, submittal capture, PO capture, anywhere where there's templates. Are you using a third-party OCR solution that is mainly zonal or template-based? AODocs plus the Google Vision API could be an option for you. I'm trying to think of any other examples. Google Data Studio, another example. We showed that, the business intelligence side of things. We do have a Gmail plugin to quickly capture documents to a targeted location, capture and tag, capture and route, facilitate a workflow kickoff that way. So there's, we fully embrace the fact that we are an ISV, that Google has tasked us with being the choice for enterprise content management within the G Suite. So unclear on the Google search specifically, but pretty much everything else that we are playing with and working with and testing out using.
That's great, Tony. Yeah, I think even for those of us who are G Suite partners, this transition to the new version of search has been shrouded in a little bit of mystery, but the context of this question was using AODocs metadata, and I think you answered that perfectly. I think all of us, and of course for the folks who joined us today, we will share updates because Agosto is also a search partner, and even for us, our line of sight on some of these new tools is a little foggy at this point, but we anticipate a lot of changes mid-summer. So I appreciate the answer for now, Tony. I think you and I will both have a clearer view of what that means to search across other applications with Google Cloud Search over the next few months. So really, really good questions coming. All right, well, I think I moved through my questions, and Tony, I don't know if it's fair to ask you in return, are there any other common questions that we hear from folks as they're evaluating AODocs, the kind of common questions or common curiosities folks have about the point?
A big one that comes up a good amount is information management, records management, retention and disposition. So we obviously Google, Google Drive Vault, Google Vault is something that comes up, and it is a very useful e-discovery tool for Drive and for Gmail, but there's always an added layer of retention that most organizations need. And policies and procedures, it may not be an area where the documents have to have an enterprise-grade retention rule applied to them, but it is something that can exist. And it's something that, so if I go back over to my Tony view real quick, and I go into the AODocs interface for this specific user, he has dynamic access to a view that Sam didn't have access to, and it falls directly in line with the concept of enterprise-grade retention and disposition. And the reason that I like talking about this, number one, people ask about it a lot, but from a user perspective, it's difficult for me to have the expectation that I'm going to become a records management expert. I think most people see this problem. So this view is the same library that Sam was in. And if you'll notice the information that was managed and captured by Sam, none of it had to do with records management. And this is really where you can leverage the concept of functional document classes. Because of the workflow and because of the document class, we knew that we automatically needed to apply a retention ID to this document type. We knew what that retention time was, and we knew what the event that we were using, in this case, expiration date. So we're able to automatically calculate a target destruction date. So think about this. If you have environments where you need enterprise retention applied, you have a file plan, you're using something like SharePoint plus Collabware, or is it user-based? Are the users relied upon to enter that information beyond what their business scope is? So within AODocs, we can automatically apply this information because we know it. We know the functional business case. We know the event type, in this case, expiration date. So why not let the system do all that heavy lifting? So the user this information is all out of sight, out of mind to him, but it's automatically applied at the document level. So it's something that we can manage, and it's something that we can incorporate to the business process. It can be folder based to where the metadata is automatically applied based on the location of the content being stored, the state that that specific document is in. So it allows you to implement your process, but also records management, information management that's focused on adoption, that focuses on the user not having to be a records management expert. And that's usually something that is a very large pain point for the enterprise. How do we properly maintain the liability around our content? And AODocs is taking a very outside, I don't want to call it outside the box, but a more modern approach, because it is based on the users actually, following because it makes sense for them, because they don't have to worry about it, in pretty much concise terms. And we had a customer in Colorado that deployed AODocs with a records management first initiative. So they were deploying AODocs for records management. They leveraged AODocs as a business process management tool around that. And in the process of deploying for records management, they ended up saving $400,000 a year in productivity costs. And in their case, they weren't worried about FTE reallocation or FTE elimination. They wanted to hire more people. So in that case, they were growing their local economy by saying, how many people can we hire now with this $400,000 that we've saved? And that was a huge win for them. And it's something that most records management professionals or information management professionals, they usually don't get to say things like that. We had an IM first requirement that ended up saving our organization almost $500,000 a year. And this was a pretty small organization. So it's fun to be a part of those projects, and it's fun to be able to help business users and stakeholders craft that kind of value statement, leveraging that G Suite environment and then our AODocs platform. So I would say that's one of the more common ones from a question perspective. In addition to that, the other use cases, how can AODocs be used as an audit mechanism and create findings and corrective actions? We'd be more than happy to do a demo that covers that. We also have recorded webinars that cover that. I'm sure that we'll be doing some more webinars with Agosto that are targeted at different business use cases. So, I would say that those are probably the more important ones that do come up. And we're more than happy to talk at length about those things.
Excellent. Okay, boy, they keep coming. I love this. Make sure I'm unmuted. Does AODocs put things in Drive or Team Drives? How does this change a user's view in Drive, Team Drive?
Yep, so we're 100% integrated with Google Drive. So we've been around for 6 years, so we've built our storage mechanism around Drive. So everything belongs to what we call a storage account, and those are organizational-based G Suite users, and their sole purpose is centralized storage of your content. So we have 3 library types, 2 of which give you structured access within Drive. The document management library, which is what we were in the Drive environment, the structure is available through the AODocs interface, through the portal environment, if you're publishing the views to another site. And then the content is still available in Drive. So the user can access it through the Drive application. They can access it through a Drive interface, a search, etc. They're not able to magically circumvent the security that you have on the content. So the experience can be maintained in Drive. The experience can be supplemented in the AODocs view, and the content can still be made available through the Drive application and things like that. So there's a pretty wide range. From a Team Drive perspective, since it's a newer feature, we really haven't seen any need to integrate with it yet, because the fact that we've been around for 6+ years and we're doing very advanced granular security and usability features that currently aren't available in Team Drive. So for instance, being able to do targeted subfolder level security, the inclusion of metadata, all of that can exist within an AODocs library within Drive. So we've had some organizations that have made the decision to use AODocs instead of Team Drive, or they've used Team Drive for more project-based collaboration, but they're using AODocs for their content management requirements. So that's kind of the long-winded answer there. Hopefully it answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. That was good. One of the folks who joined us today noticed that you had bookmarked HR hiring have you seen or worked with organizations who are leveraging AODocs for hiring? And maybe you could describe how.
Yep, absolutely. So HR is always a funny conversation and an interesting conversation because it depends on what that organization is using for an HR system. You know, are they using something like iSIMS for talent management? In that case, that's their mechanism to do a lot of the heavy lifting there, and AODocs becomes supplemental and more of a storage and metadata capacity and capturing information and putting retention on the information. Some organizations may not have a hiring platform. So in that case, you can actually use, and here's an HR library that actually goes through the hiring process. We can send automatic emails out to an interviewee. We can manage their CV. We can manage our job publications out to a site, which I think we have here as well. So if I go over to the portal view, HR, open positions. So we're publishing job openings to a Google site that people can go ahead and submit metadata through a Google form on. We got our job postings as Google Docs, published Google Docs available. So I can open this up and apply to the job description. So we've got the ability to create these workflows that make sense from a hiring perspective. So in here, I've got my candidates. I've got their, and so it looks like Julian recently applied for a job, who's on the call on the AODocs side. Give him a quick shout out for doing such a great job maintaining our partner relationships. So we can see that, you know, where we're at in our process. The metadata that's a part of the process. What's important. And one of our newer features that we've just validated is HR hiring is always a funny one because you've got all those government forms you need to fill out, you know, your I-9s, you know, anything else that's related. You can now use AODocs metadata and automatically generate a PDF using a fillable form. So you can map the metadata to a form template and then automatically capture it back up into AODocs, which is awesome because you now have the ability to create multiple government forms through a single source metadata capture. And then all that information is automatically stored and managed the right way. So, you know, you've got hiring, you've got employee management. So managing PTO requests, managing employment reviews, managing, you know, from the financial side, purchase requests, CapEx requests, OpEx requests, having full levels of visibility. So it's, again, extremely wide ranging in how AODocs can be leveraged. If you want to see an HR hiring demo, we're more than happy to set that up with you as well. So in this case, we've got onboarding employee management, which includes the onboarding process, as well as the PTO requests. And these two environments are actually linked together. So when we make a hire, we automatically kick off an onboarding process in this environment.
Oh, that's good. All right, one more that I'd like to sneak in, Tony, if we can. Great question. Can other Google formats be managed? Is there any interaction today with sites or any other Google tools?
Yep, absolutely. So this is a Google site right here. So what we've been working in is a Google site. We actually have the Google form that integration that we have as well. So this is a work order. So if I'm out in the field, I can fill out this Google form, and this can instantly go generate a workflow inside an AODocs environment. So we've got, you know, forms integration, you've got the sites integration, Google Data Studio integration. If you want to offload attachments into GCS, you could do something like that. So if you had an archive use case where you actually wanted to move the content out of Drive into a GCS instance, you know, fantastic. We can work on something like that. So it is very wide ranging. We've got customers that are, you know, for the PTO request, it's automatically sending out the calendar information. It's posting information to the team, the group, the management calendars. So the fact that we are within the Google infrastructure, it means that we can easily integrate with all these Google mechanisms, these Google tools and utilities. If you wanted to use App Maker for a more advanced front end and then plug that into AODocs, you could. You know, the possibilities are really endless. And we're working on some really fun, exciting use cases with our customers to really unlock the G Suite and these Google tools and putting some logic and process behind them. So it's exciting.
Excellent. I'm impressed, Tony. We managed to get through a lot of questions this afternoon, and thanks to the audience and those that contributed questions. I think that really made this a very meaty conversation. I would like to remind everyone, as we mentioned at the top of the call, that that our friends at AODocs are happy to explore any areas of interest in more detail. We're sharing here the different ways that you can reach out to us if you'd like to give AODocs a try, or you'd like some help evaluating your environment and seeing if it's a good fit. Also, as a reminder, this presentation will be available online after today, so if there was any area of specific interest that you weren't able to take notes on quickly enough, or we'll make this available after the fact. So, and as always, I welcome direct questions. Tony, I can't thank you enough today. Any other parting thoughts as we leave our friends today?
Just to reiterate the point that we are available. We want to be a resource for you guys as you look to put more process controls and move enterprise content management to the G Suite environment. We are resources for you guys. We've got a ton of assets that Agosto can share with you guys. More than happy to schedule conversations, one-on-one demos, open a fully functional trial. We can help you guys build out test environments to validate specific use cases. Again, we've got a wide ranging of customer applications, starting simply with file server migrations to Drive, SharePoint migrations, on-base migrations. We've got customers that are decommissioning thousands of Lotus applications and really boiling them down into, one or two AODocs applications using the workflow engine. One customer is targeting 157 Lotus applications to 9 in AODocs. So you see significant productivity and cost savings by leveraging this system inside of the G Suite. So, challenge us with something that you think we can handle. That's always my favorite part of the job, is working with something that a customer thought that they had to build a 100% custom application for. We had someone challenge us with digital asset management recently, and we quickly threw together a pilot environment that showcased that. Also showed them consumption of content across the globe. So pretty cool stuff. So reach out to us. Can't thank Agosto enough for being a part of this webinar and asking us to be a part of this webinar series. I'm looking forward to many more with them down the road.
Appreciate it. I appreciate everyone's time this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. Tony, as always, appreciate having my smart friends from AODocs along. We'll look forward to exploring further with many of you, and hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.